History often presents empires as monuments of inevitability, vast, confident, and unshakable. Maps freeze them in time, colored boldly, suggesting permanence and control. But real power is rarely as secure as it appears on paper. Behind the grand borders and naval parades lie quiet fears, private calculations, and decisions made in rooms heavy with smoke and anxiety. In the years before the First World War, one such fear haunted the heart of the British Empire. It was not an enemy army, nor a rival fleet. It was something far more basic, far more dangerous: the question of energy. This is the story of how a single resource reshaped strategy, redrew borders, and pulled an empire into a land it never intended to rule, setting in motion the creation of a country whose very purpose was written in oil. If you studied a world map in the summer of 1914, the British Empire would dominate your vision. Its territories, shaded confidently in imperial pink, stretched across roughly a quarter of the Earth's surface. It was the largest empire humanity had ever assembled, so vast that daylight forever touched some corner of its domain. Britain ruled the seas, commanded global trade routes, and appeared, at least from afar, to be an unbreakable structure of wealth, power, and certainty. But that image was an illusion. Step inside the smoke-filled private office of the First Lord of the Admiralty in Whitehall during that same summer, and you would not find men congratulating themselves on imperial greatness. You would find anxiety, quiet, controlled, but unmistakable fear. Their concern was not German armies marching through Belgium, nor the endless manpower of Russia. It was something far more elemental: fuel. For a century, British industrial and military dominance had rested on a single substance: coal. Britain was, quite literally, an island built on coal. The damp valleys of Wales produced the finest steam coal on Earth, cheap, abundant, and above all, British. The Royal Navy, the iron shield of the empire, depended entirely on it. From Gibraltar to Singapore, imperial coaling stations were stacked high with black Welsh anthracite. As long as ships burned coal, Britain controlled the lifeblood of global power. Then technology changed the rules. By the early 20th century, progress was moving faster than empires could comfortably manage. In 1912, Winston Churchill, young, bold, and fiercely ambitious as head of the Admiralty, made a decision that stunned the British establishment. He ordered the Royal Navy to abandon coal and convert its battleships to oil. Militarily, the logic was undeniable. Oil burned hotter, giving ships greater speed and acceleration. It burned cleaner, removing the towering plumes of black smoke that revealed fleets on the horizon. And it was liquid, easily pumped through pipes instead of shoveled by exhausted stokers deep below deck. Ships could refuel at sea, extending their operational range almost without limit. An oil-powered navy was faster, stealthier, and deadlier. To prove it, Churchill authorized the construction of a new generation of super dreadnoughts, the Queen Elizabeth-class battleships, designed to run exclusively on oil. Strategically, however, the decision was terrifying. Britain had no oil, none in Wales, none in Scotland, none beneath the English countryside. By embracing oil, Churchill traded the absolute security of domestic coal for dependence on a foreign resource hauled across oceans. It was a gamble on a global scale, and it sent shockwaves through the British government. That single decision would drag Britain toward the Middle East. It would transform malarial swamps in Ottoman Mesopotamia into the most coveted land on Earth. It would turn war into something resembling a corporate acquisition conducted at gunpoint. This is the story of how Britain's hunger for oil led it to invade a country that did not yet exist, how the British state quietly bought an oil company, then used its army to protect that investment, and how Iraq was shaped not as a nation for a people, but as a container for petroleum. To understand why British soldiers would one day die under the Iraqi sun, we must go back a decade earlier, to a man named William Knox D'Arcy. D'Arcy was neither soldier nor statesman. He was a gold miner who had struck it rich in Australia and returned to London to live comfortably in Grosvenor Square. But comfort bored him. He was a gambler by nature, restless, searching for another great wager. Around 1900, D'Arcy heard whispers from French geologists about oil seeping from the deserts of Persia, modern Iran. At the time, global oil came from Pennsylvania and Baku. Persia was dismissed as barren, dangerous, and absurd. Investors laughed at the idea. D'Arcy did not. Using diplomatic channels, he approached the Shah of Persia and in 1901 secured a staggering concession: exclusive rights to search for oil across a territory larger than France for 60 years. In return, the Shah received $20,000 up front and a promise of 16% of future profits. For 7 brutal years, Darcy poured money into the desert. He hired a self-taught engineer, George Reynolds, who dragged heavy drilling equipment by camel and mule through the Zagros Mountains. Disease ravaged the camps: typhoid, cholera, smallpox. Tribal leaders demanded bribes. Supplies vanished. Temperatures soared beyond 120 degrees. In London, Darcy's fortune evaporated. He mortgaged his home, borrowed from friends, teetered on the edge of ruin. The Admiralty watched closely, but refused to help. By 1908, the syndicate's directors lost faith. A telegram was sent to Reynolds: stop drilling, dismiss the men, abandon the project. Reynolds ignored it. Convinced he was close, he ordered one final week of drilling. On May 26, 1908, the ground at Masjid Soliman trembled. A roar erupted from below, and a geyser of crude oil burst 50 feet into the air, soaking the desert in black rain. One of the largest oil fields on Earth had been found. The world changed overnight. Darcy formed the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, ancestor of today's BP. Pipelines were laid from mountain to coast. A massive refinery rose on the swampy island of Abadan along the Shatt al-Arab waterway. The Persian Gulf was transformed from a quiet backwater into the future fuel depot of empire, but the geography was dangerous. The oil lay in Persia, yet its chukau to the sea ran through the Shatt al-Arab, the border with the Ottoman Empire. Across the water sat Ottoman Basra. The Turks watched British gunboats patrol the river and understood a simple truth: geology ignores borders. If oil existed in Persia, it almost certainly extended beneath Ottoman soil: Basra, Baghdad, Mosul. In London, Churchill reached a conclusion. The Navy's fuel could not be entrusted to a private company. Companies could fail, sell to rivals, or be absorbed by foreign giants. So in the summer of 1914, weeks before war erupted in Europe, Churchill pushed Parliament to authorize the government's purchase of 51% of Anglo-Persian oil. This detail matters. When World War I began, Anglo-Persian was not merely British. It was the British state itself. Corporate profit and imperial security had merged. As Europe slid toward war, British planners studied their maps. Germany mattered. France mattered. But their gaze kept returning to the Shatt al-Arab. If the Ottomans joined Germany, they could sever the pipeline, shell Abadan, and strangle the Royal Navy's fuel supply. On October 2, 1914, before any declaration of war, Britain secretly ordered Indian troops to sail to the Persian Gulf. Their mission was clear: secure the oil. On November 5th, Britain declared war on the Ottoman Empire. The next day, British guns opened fire at the mouth of the Shatt al-Arab. The invasion of Iraq had begun. What followed was meant to be brief: protect the refinery, secure the pipeline, hold Basra. But oil rarely settles for caution, and empires rarely stop once they start moving north. By late 1915, General Townshend was ordered to gamble everything on one final push toward Baghdad. His army, already exhausted, undersupplied, and worn down by disease and heat, advanced to a place called Ctesiphon, barely 20 miles from the city. There, among the ruins of an ancient Persian arch that had once symbolized imperial grandeur, they collided head-on with the main Ottoman force. What followed was catastrophe. The Ottomans were ready. They had dug deep defensive lines, brought fresh troops down from the north, and positioned heavy artillery with care. Townshend hurled his men forward again and again, hoping sheer momentum would break the lines. British and Indian soldiers charged with extraordinary courage, running straight into machine gun fire. They were cut down in waves. By the end of a single day, nearly a third of his army lay dead or wounded. Townshend finally understood the truth. Baghdad was beyond his reach. He ordered a retreat to Kut al-Amara, a miserable town of mud houses sitting inside a bend of the Tigris River. There, he chose to dig in and wait for reinforcements. He believed relief would come quickly. He believed the empire would not abandon him. He was wrong. Ottoman forces encircled Kut and sealed it off completely. Trenches closed in from every direction. The siege began. Inside the town, roughly 13,000 British and Indian soldiers were trapped alongside civilians. Food was scarce. Ammunition was limited. Winter loomed. British command in Basra launched desperate rescue attempts, sending relief columns up the river again and again. The landscape betrayed them. Flat, exposed ground with no cover. Ottoman machine guns tore through the advancing troops. 23,000 men died trying to save the 13,000 inside Kut. Within the town, starvation set in. Rations were slashed repeatedly. Horses and mules were slaughtered for food. When the animals ran out, some soldiers faced an unthinkable choice. Many Indian troops refused to eat horse meat for religious reasons, choosing hunger over violating their faith. Disease spread unchecked. Sewage filled the trenches. The air itself became unbearable. Townshend sat in his headquarters sending increasingly frantic telegrams. In one final act of desperation, he offered the Ottoman commander, Nuruddin Pasha, £1 million in gold in exchange for parole. The offer was rejected with contempt. The British Empire, Nuruddin replied, could not buy its way out. On April 29, 1916, after 147 days of siege, Townshend surrendered. It was one of the greatest humiliations in British military history, worse even than Yorktown. 13,000 men marched into captivity, skeletal, broken, their uniforms hanging loosely from wasted frames. They were forced north across the desert toward camps in Anatolia. Thousands died along the way, from thirst, beatings, and exhaustion, leaving bodies scattered across the sand. Townshend himself was spared. He was treated as an honored guest, housed in comfort near Istanbul, drinking tea with Ottoman officers. His men rotted in prison camps. Kut should have ended Britain's adventure in Mesopotamia. It exposed the invasion as a disaster, a waste of blood and treasure. But there was oil, and oil does not allow retreat. Britain could not walk away. The government now owned the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. The fleet depended on its fuel. Prestige demanded revenge. London doubled down. A new commander was sent, General Frederick Maud, cold, methodical, and relentless. He arrived with overwhelming force. Heavy artillery, aircraft, tanks, fresh troops. Railways were built from Basra to the front. What had begun as a colonial expedition was transformed into an industrial war machine. Maud advanced slowly, crushing Ottoman defenses piece by piece. Kut was retaken. The dead were avenged. In March 1917, British troops entered Baghdad. Once again, the proclamation was read. We come not as conquerors, but as liberators. But the true prize still lay beyond reach. Mosul remained in Ottoman hands, and Mosul meant oil. As the European war dragged toward its conclusion in 1918, the race for Mosul became the central objective of the Middle Eastern campaign. Time was running out. Britain knew a peace treaty was coming, and under international law, only territory physically occupied at the war's end could be claimed. This set the stage for the final act. On October 30, 1918, aboard the battleship HMS Agamemnon anchored off Lemnos, Ottoman representatives signed the Armistice of Mudros. The war was officially over. Guns were to fall silent. Front lines were to freeze. At that moment, British forces stood south of Mosul. They had not taken the city. Ottoman flags still flew over its citadel. Ali Ihsan Pasha commanded a functioning garrison. In London, however, the cabinet studied a secret geological report confirming vast oil reserves beneath Mosul. Stopping now would leave that oil in Turkish, or possibly French, hands. So Britain broke the peace. Orders were sent to General William Marshall, keep marching. British troops advanced on Mosul after the armistice had been signed. Ali Ihsan Pasha protested, citing international law and the terms of the treaty. Marshall ignored him. He issued an ultimatum: surrender or face destruction. With no hope of support, the Ottomans withdrew. Mosul fell. The heist was complete. Britain now controlled Basra, Baghdad, and Mosul, the port, the administration, and the oil. But taking the land was only the beginning. Keeping it required diplomacy as ruthless as war. The problem was France. In 1916, Britain and France had secretly divided the Middle East under the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Mosul had been assigned to the French sphere. At the time, Britain had not understood its value. Now they did. In December 1918, French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau met privately with David Lloyd George in London. No notes were taken, no witnesses present. Lloyd George asked Clemenceau what he wanted. Syria, came the answer. Britain agreed. Damascus and the Arabs who had fought alongside Lawrence were handed to French rule. In return, France relinquished Mosul. A handshake sealed the fate of millions. The deal was formalized at San Remo in 1920. Britain received the mandate for Mesopotamia and legal control of the oil, but governance posed a new challenge. Mesopotamia was not a nation. It was 3 Ottoman provinces with little in common. Basra looked to the Gulf. Baghdad was a Sunni urban center. Mosul was Kurdish and Turkoman, tied to Anatolia. No shared identity existed. Britain ignored this. They needed pipeline security. So they fused the provinces into a single state and called it Iraq, a name never before used for a country. Borders were drawn not by culture or history, but by the needs of oil. Independence had been promised. What followed was rebellion. In 1920, Iraq erupted. Clerics issued fatwas. Tribes rose. Kurds rebelled. British garrisons fell. London panicked. Churchill's solution was air control. Villages were bombed, livestock destroyed, revolt crushed from the sky. A king was installed. Faisal, foreign, unfamiliar, but convenient, was crowned. Britain wrote the constitution, designed the flag, and kept the oil. By 1925, the final concession was signed. Iraq's oil was handed to foreign companies for 75 years. Royalties were symbolic. Profits flowed abroad. The oil flowed. Empires benefited. Iraq paid the price. Born not of a people, but of petroleum, the state carried that original sin forward, through coups, dictators, and wars yet to come. The first oil war had been fought, and its shadow has never lifted.